Good day, everyone. I'm Efe, which is pool of member 2025 edition. In my left part, you're gonna see a pretty phenomenal person, which is John Holland. So,
Mhm.
would you a little bit introduce yourself? Exactly, I want to ask who you are.
Right. Well, I'm originally from the United States. I've lived in Europe for 41 years now, and I have wanted to be a journalist since I was 8 years old. My mother visited me in the hospital and brought a newspaper, and in the newspaper there were all these foreign bylines and places in the world, and I knew even then that I wanted to be a foreign correspondent and work in exciting, interesting places covering events. And I was just a very curious kid, and I've kept that
Wow,
curiosity.
that's pretty
Mm.
splendid. So, let me ask where you grow up. Is that any member of your family? Is that also have a little bit journalism background, or
Yeah,
so? What
yeah,
would you like to say about that?
yeah. No, I mean, the part of the states where I come from, Chicago, has a very strong journalistic tradition. And in fact, the first organization I worked for in Chicago, the motto was, "If your mother says she loves you, check it out." And so there was always this healthy skepticism. My mother, I think, inspired me most closely to become a journalist or to think about journalism as an extension of curiosity. So I think that curiosity is something that is very inbred in the Midwest. It's something very strong, a strong sense of wanting to know what's going on in the wider world and how it impacts people who sometimes think that they are in a quiet place, but we know that the world is more connected
Thank you
than
for
we think.
describing.
Yeah.
So let me tell you, okay, like you also made it to many things on US, and after the moving European Union, especially this continental, how this idea happened, and it's pretty kind of risk and big decision, like how this relationship started, why and how you decided to came to specifically, I think Germany, you first moved. Would you like to tell more specifically about that?
Yeah, actually, I started in Austria when I did an
Hmm.
exchange program. Part of it was journalistically driven, so I was in Austria and Hungary, and this was before the fall of the Iron Curtain. So Hungary was still a so-called communist socialist state, and Austria was on the other side, the free side. But Europe, of course, is marked very much by its diversity, but also its divisions. And the time that I came to Europe was a time of relative stability in the sense that you had the East and the West. And after the fall of the wall, which I covered, that began to splinter, and it created new challenges, and it unearthed new earthquake faults or faults
All right.
in Europe, which of course led to more upheavals, which led to more wars, which things led to other things that I also covered. And I uh, literally was there when a lot of big changes happened. And now we're starting to see those changes reversing themselves in a way. The walls seem to, metaphorically and otherwise, they seem to be going up again. And the divisions, suspension of Schengen, countries putting up border checks again in the EU is it's thought provoking. It's very concerning. It's very unsettling that in an age of connectedness through the internet, we should actually be more alienated from each other than we ought to be, perhaps.
Wow, it's pretty comprehensive explanation. So let me jump to the next question. It will be more, how do you describe that to some little bit differentness? Like, of course, you tackle Chicago and then plus Austria. I think it's pretty different phase. What was more visible? And then when you came example after moving United States to that place, what you saw that in working place, what kind of differentness or what you saw it differently perhaps in here?
When I moved to Europe, you mean?
True.
Yeah, I think the biggest change, obviously, is language, because the linguistics, there are so many different languages, there are so many different cultures. America is a big country,
Okay.
but it's a monolingual society. Culture is very similar across many parts of the United States. I mean, in the mythology of Hollywood, we have the West and cowboys. In the East, we have the big cities, and we have the farmers in the Midwest and all of that. Basically, a Beach Boys type song, right? But the
True.
reality is that popular culture in the United States is far more uniform and has been for a long time through the commercial drivers. In Europe, I think the underlying cultural differences are still very strong. And in a good way, to a point, a very good way. You can go a very short distance and see a lot of different kinds of cultures, and you see this constant sort of mixing and melding of ways of thinking. It's a true melting pot, and it's funny because Americans have always been told and believed that they are a melting pot and very tolerant and open, and I think many Americans still are. But the true progressive, or the true, I would say, enlightened sense of, love thy neighbor,
Wow.
respect thy neighbor, is still probably more deeply ingrained in European tradition. Although, of course, as we know, 2 world wars were started here.
True.
And that is something that is always kind of bubbling under the surface. But if the expression is make love or make business rather than war, Europe is probably in a better place to do that at the moment than other places, like even the United States.
Wow. So thank you. It's pretty deep meaning. So let's jump to the slowly conclusion. I have last question to you. One can be like, of course, we talk a lot of also positivity, but not that also too easy. It is a lot of also stress happen. What kind of challenge you faced it? Perhaps some moment it was landmark in your life. Perhaps something that you saw it and you say really interesting moment of my journalism career. What would you like to say about that?
I mean, very briefly, I think change, and rapid, sudden, sometimes very violent change, has a huge impact on journalists trying to cover fear, uncertainty, excitement. I'll give you a couple of examples. I mean, the fall of the Berlin Wall certainly was one. It was the peaceful revolution that I covered in Czechoslovakia in '89, the so-called Velvet Revolution. It was the Romanian Revolution, which was extremely violent. It was the wars of Yugoslavia in the early '90s, working in Bosnia and in Sarajevo and watching walls and barricades go up. I think change is often seen, and rightly so, as a good thing. It's very human. But most people in Europe, as in elsewhere, don't handle change very well when it comes extremely quickly. It creates more fear than a sense of wonder or excitement. It's more defensive, and as a result, you have more frictions that have arisen. And as I said, I've covered a number of wars that started out of conflicts, that started out of change that was imposed. And I think for journalists, it's making sense as quickly as possible to tell the story in a way which also helps to hold the powerful to account, so that society maintains some balance and some equality, so that we understand change better and can make better use of the change that is natural, but not to let it run away with our worst impulses, which is to be very violent and defensive when the change is seen as imposed or forced on us too quickly. And we're living in the AI revolution now, or the AI generation.
Currently, yep.
And that is going to be a really strong driver for how well people embrace reality and make sense of truth, and how truth is then perceived through the lens or the filter of AI. So for me and my work in communications, it's also very much about going back to basics, but also understanding and embracing the technology, because change is inevitable, constant change, and we just need to continue as journalists and people with a journalistic ethos like me, make sense of that and try to tell it in a down-to-earth, straightforward way that people can visualize and, again, come to better terms with and hopefully profit from, to have a better life from that. So,
thank you, John. Wow. So it will be more. This question is it came to my mind. It's pretty personal, but let me ask that. Limited time, especially in the White House, if you're as a journalist and you came from, it's pretty like CNBC or CNN and Fox, whatever. So you went and you're gonna ask some question in pretty limited time, and also in your around, also many coworker and really competition, another newspaper also has. What do you think to, while asking specifically, that can be prime minister, so on, how you give a direction? You're also really more than 20 years communication expert. Also, you are doing your company. To giving some limited time and pretty frankly and clear answer to big person in the front of. What would you like to some specific technical things that you gain experience in your whole journey?
And in conclusion, I would say holding the powerful to account means asking the uncomfortable, direct questions. What did you know? When did you know it? To what extent do you, Mr. or Miss Powerful Person, acknowledge not only the power that you have, but more importantly, the limits of your power, where your power needs to be coordinated with other forces that essentially put a check and balance, that puts some sort of a restraint, because power can very quickly get away from the powerful and it can be very badly misused. So in a nutshell, when you're asking a question of a so-called powerful person, it's to ask a question in a way as specific as possible that indicates, do you understand your responsibilities of power and not just the rights of power? And the more specific the question that you can ask in a very short time frame, like at a White House briefing or a Pentagon briefing or a European Commission briefing, the more difficult it is for the politician or the commissar to deflect and change the subject. And I think that's a skill that journalists have to keep under time pressure, is to know what kind of question is going to be very difficult to avoid, and that they cannot simply evade the question by trying to use lots of empty language. The more specific the question, the more factual the question, the harder it is to avoid it. And as a result, it means that the audience is better served by the answer that the politician or the powerful person gives. And we can then decide, as time goes on, are we going to continue to support that politician? Are we going to support that company? Are we going to support that policy? Are we going to vote against it in the next election? Is there going to be a next election, for example? All of these questions are valid, and we need to be very much on the heels of the powerful and find those specific questions that hold them to account.
Pretty briefly, thank you so much. A lot of young people also gonna listen that from, especially in this area. What would you like to say? Perhaps some last, any thoughts, any conclusion before we finish?
Be curious. Cultivate your curiosity. Be very skeptical of what you see and what you hear, but try to avoid becoming cynical, that there are, or even nihilistic, meaning that everything is bad, there's no sense in what we're all doing. If everybody is cheating somehow, nobody is cheating, or if everybody is breaking a law, then what do we need laws for? The whole purpose for young people who are going to become the masters of the next generation is holding the powerful to account, recognizing the responsibilities, and making sure that as journalists who follow it, that we have a very valuable role to play in society that must be protected. And the truth always comes out in the end. The truth always comes out. It's best if it comes through the hard work of journalists rather than that it comes out tragically in other ways that have unforeseen consequences. The power of the pen is still, in my humble view, mightier than the power of the sword.
Thank you so much, John. It's pretty lovely to hear. So everyone, thanks for watching. It will be thrilling to continue with another journalist in next episode. It's pretty lovely to you giving your time to us. So take care and let's keep in touch in another European Year Poltad content. So thank you so much.
Thank you.